I think it's important to talk about the things that Canadians care about. And Mr. Speaker, the questions that we're... Can I finish?
I'm afraid we have come to the end of period of debate. And it is now time to begin with statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Albie was a light to all who knew him. He loved to sing and dance and brought joy across our community through his performances. He was deeply loved and had a bright future ahead. Albie wanted to live, but in June of this year, his parents, Lisa and Albert, lost Albie to the poison drug crisis at just 23 years old. In his mom's words, close your eyes and imagine losing your child to this. We are losing children left and right. We have to do something. In fact, experts tell us we have to do more of everything. More treatment, more mental health supports, more housing, and more harm reduction. In the meantime, my thanks to frontline workers who are saving lives like those at Sanguine, the Working Centre, Community Health Caring, and Thresholds in my community. I encourage all my colleagues to support expanding the resources they provide so parents don't have to lose their children this way.
The honourable member from Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, September 30th is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, also known as the Orange Shirt Day. It is an occasion for all Canadians to honor survivors and the children who never returned home. This day is also an opportunity to remember and recognize the centennial and invaluable solidarity between Indigenous peoples and Chinese Canadians in British Columbia. The Musqueam people stood with the early Chinese immigrant at a time when support was most needed. Both communities co-create the Chinese Market Garden on the Musqueam Reserve. As we reflect on this important history, we must remember the kindness, selflessness, and courage of our Indigenous peoples. Truth needs to come forward before reconciliation. Let us continue the path toward reconciliations and moving towards healing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Foothills.
It is an honour today to recognize Captain William H. Wilson, a man who has served his country and his community more in his 100 years than any of us could possibly dream in 100 lifetimes. Captain Wilson served with the Royal Canadian Navy in the HMCS Ottawa at D-Day and was honoured with the Atlantic Star for his bravery. The Royal Canadian Navy named him the first honorary captain of Canada's first submarine squadron in honour of his tireless efforts to raise awareness of Canada's deep Navy history. Known as the Rabbit, he had this uncanny ability to find amazing artifacts for the Navy Museum in Calgary, a facility many believe wouldn't even exist were it not for his tireless efforts. Whether it was his time as the manager for the transportation of the '88 Olympics, a long career at CP Rail, or being honoured with the Order of Excellence in Alberta, his commitment to community is unparalleled. So please join me in this House to wish Captain Bill a happy 100th birthday. And from Foothills, thank you for your service.
The honourable member from St. John's East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across St. John's East this summer, what I heard was clear. We need to protect our progress. Parents want more $10 a day childcare spaces. 10,000 Newfoundland and Labradorians went to the dentist, many for the first time in many, many years. Kids go to school now with full bellies because of the Food School program investment. People want to see more climate action, not less. And healthcare remains a top priority, which is why we've made significant investments. I heard from St. John's East that they want this progress to continue, not to be cancelled and not to be cut. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, Bay James, Nunavik, EU. Mr. Speaker, I would like to highlight Stéphane Grenier's 20 years of dedicated involvement on the La Piole Board of Directors, and also to highlight his unwavering commitment to the least well-off in Val d'Or. Thanks to him, La Piole has been able to grow and to offer vital support to many people in need. Stéphane's leadership, kindness, and determination have helped our community become more supportive and inclusive. Through his actions, Stéphane has shown that it is possible to make a real difference. He has been listening to, supporting, and defending the rights of the most vulnerable while mobilizing resources to meet the challenges we face. He has always been present on the ground where the needs are the greatest. Whether it's offering a meal, comforting someone in distress, or simply lending an attentive ear. Thanks to him, a number of major projects have been launched in Val d'Or, including the Château de Mariève. Stéphane, you're a role model for us all. Your story reminds us of the importance of acting compassionately and in solidarity. Thank you for everything you've done.
The honourable member from Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, today I rise to recognise the outstanding young athletes in Avalon who took part in the 2024 Newfoundland and Labrador Summer Games this past August, hosted by the town of Bay Roberts. Mr. Speaker, thousands of young athletes aged 13 to 15 from across the province showed exemplary sportsmanship, athleticism, teamwork and skill. It was an honour to witness such a remarkable celebration of sport and community. A special thank you to the Bay Roberts Mayor, Walter Yetman, members of the organising committee, and especially Judy Morrow and Neil Kearley, co-chairs of Newfoundland Labrador Summer Games, who have been part of this since the initiative in 2018. A sincere thank you to each coach, parent, family member, volunteer, spectator, driver and sponsor for your support. It wouldn't have happened without you. Today these young people are our athletes. Tomorrow they are our leaders. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members to join me in applauding everyone involved with the 2024 Newfoundland and Labrador Summer Games. Thank you.
The honourable member from Battleford's Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, life has never been more expensive for Canadians. The Prime Minister has doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, caused the worst inflation in 40 years, sent 2 million people to the food bank, and unleashed crime and chaos in our communities. And their NDP coalition partners have been there to support them at every turn of the way. The NDP leader claimed that he ripped up their coalition agreement in a desperate attempt to distance himself from their disastrous record. But now, with a motion of confidence on the table, the NDP leader is putting himself and his pension ahead of Canadians. Canadians are desperate for change. It's time for the Bloc and the NDP to stop protecting this costly Prime Minister. We need a carbon tax election now so that Canadians can vote to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
The honourable member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, we had a very busy summer in Brampton, and today I would like to highlight the incredible achievements of our residents in suburbs. Bramptonian played in Copa America and represented Canada at the Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris. Brampton is Canada's cricket capital, and we hosted a world's famous GT20 tournament where global stars played at the highest level, inspiring us all. While a record-breaking ice hockey game organized by the City of Brampton raised over $1 million for our local hospital, all-age field hockey and kabaddi tournaments continue to grow in popularity. Mr. Speaker, I was especially pleased to present awards to our youngest players at the Children's Soccer Tournament in Brampton South. Sports are key to good health and well-being. Let's continue to celebrate our athletes and promote active living in Brampton and across Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, over the summer I had the privilege of engaging with the vibrant 55-plus older adults community across my riding of Winnipeg South Centre. From visits to the Parkway, Riverbend Plaza, Fred Tipping Place, Riverwood Square, Villa Cabrini, and the Thorvaldson Care Centre, I witnessed firsthand the contributions of older adults to our community. One highlight was meeting the Residences Council at Riverbend Plaza, where we discussed the Safe Long-Term Care Act, a national strategy on aging, and the importance of aging close to home. We also celebrated the 65th anniversary of the Thorvaldson Care Centre. Manitoba's only intermediate care facility where 3 generations of the Thorvaldson family have provided compassionate care to older adults. This anniversary is a powerful reminder of the importance of establishing strong standards in long-term care to ensure dignity and quality for all Canadians as they age. A special thank you, Mr. Speaker, to Moira Jones and everyone on my Winnipeg South Centre Older Adults Council for enriching the fabric of our community. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we tabled a non-confidence motion so that we can stop this country being destroyed by this minority Liberal government, which has been in power for much too long. The NDP kept the government alive on a respirator. Now the Bloc is doing the same thing. The Bloc is swanning around, shouting from all rooftops that it defends Quebecers. François Legault, though, he is the Premier of Quebec. He speaks on behalf of Quebecers, and he's asking the Bloc to bring down this incompetent government. Why is the Bloc saying one thing and doing another? Rather than being in cahoots with the Liberals, the Bloc Québécois should defend Quebecers. One example would be the fact that the Bloc is a terrible negotiator. They haven't been able to achieve anything. They haven't been able to get the Caribou Decree cancelled, for instance. The Bloc is selling its soul to this Liberal government, and it's not getting a thing for Quebec. What's the Bloc Québécois for? Well, they voted for more spending than ever, for doubling the government machine, for more scandals than ever, with the money of Quebecers. Who does the Bloc stand for? Well, one thing's clear. They do not stand for Quebecers.
Member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to remember my dear friend, Gail Christie, former mayor of the Borough of York, who passed away on August 14th and was laid to rest on September the 8th. Gail's journey began in Toronto, where she first stepped into public service as a trustee on the Board of Education. Her dedication propelled her to become the alderman and ultimately the mayor of York from 1978 to 1982. Representing her community on Metro Toronto Council. Gail's legacy is a testament to the power of perseverance and passion. As a mother and a woman that is active in politics, she inspired countless others to break barriers and pursue their dreams in leadership roles, myself included. Her unwavering commitment serves as a reminder that women can, and women should, be at the forefront of decision-making. As we reflect on her contributions, let us honor Gail's memory by continuing her fight for equality and for communities. My deepest condolences to the family. Thank you.
Just a reminder to all members to try to keep their statements to 60 seconds so that this can go quickly. The Honourable Member from Barrie Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. Under this soft-on-crime Liberal government, car theft is up 34%, including being up by over 300% in Toronto.
Unbelievable.
We know that in Ontario, 68% of those convicted for an auto theft-related offence serve a sentence of 6 months or less. Just recently, we learned that Ontario's carjacking task force made 124 arrests between September 2023 and March 2024. Shockingly, nearly half of the people arrested by this task force were out on bail at the time of their arrest, and 61% of those offenders were subsequently released on bail yet again. This crime wave is a direct result of this government's soft-on-crime, catch-release policies, which repealed mandatory minimum sentences and made bail more accessible to criminals. Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to bring down this costly government and stop the crime. Will the NDP Liberal government let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Member from Mission, Matsqui, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. 2 years ago, the sellout leader of the NDP sold out workers and signed on to a costly coalition with the Liberal Prime Minister that hiked taxes, ballooned food costs, doubled housing costs, and unleashed record crime and chaos on our once safe streets. On top of all that, he voted in favor to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to break down this costly government.
Yes, there is.
Canadians need a carbon tax election now to decide between the costly coalition of the NDP Liberals, who tax your food, punish your work, take your money, double your housing costs, and unleash crime and drugs in your communities, or Conservatives that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
The honourable member from Sherbrooke. L'honorable député de Sherbrooke.
The honourable member for Sherbrooke. Last week marked the 6th annual Military Families Appreciation Day. This year, the day was especially meaningful for me and for my family. My husband, who was an honorary colonel in the Sherbrooke Hussars, my husband and I, we're very proud of our son, who's currently on mission in Latvia. Like many Canadian soldiers, he is taking part in Operation Reassurance, which aims to contribute to NATO's deterrence and defense measures in Central and Eastern Europe. Today, my thoughts are with all families like ours, families which are making the sacrifice of sharing one of their loved ones so that Canada can fulfill its role as peacekeeper around the world. As we know, the current global context requires us to strengthen our presence in different regions of the world to prevent conflicts from spreading. Let's be proud of Canada's international contribution. Let's be proud of the members of our military, but let's also be proud of their families who provide them with unwavering support.
The honourable member from Timmins, James Bay.
The opioid nightmare is devastating small and medium-sized towns who simply do not have the resources to address the overwhelming nature of the crisis. People dying from poisoned drugs, a lack of treatment opportunities, a housing crisis, and predatory gangs who are making our neighborhoods unsafe. The City of Timmins recently held the first ever municipal summit on addressing the opioid crisis. The message is clear: municipalities can't do this on their own. The federal government needs to be at the table with increased mental health supports, a credible housing strategy that smaller communities can take advantage of, funding for treatment and recovery, and empowering police with a credible gang strategy to shut down the violence. And in Timmins, the model of the firekeepers, Indigenous teams working the streets to keep people safe and alive, could be a national model. What we don't need are Conservative MPs pouring gasoline on the crisis, which have led to serious death threats against doctors and nurses keeping people alive. In the end, our job is keeping people safe on our streets and keeping our loved ones alive.
Yeah.
The honourable member for Avignon-Lamitis, Matane-Matapédia. On August 8th, a great woman made the people of Saint-Luc-sur-Mer and all Quebecers proud. Maude Charon won the silver medal in the 59-kilogram class at the Paris Olympic Games after lifting a total of 236 kilograms. The weightlifter from Lamitis was surrounded by her family as she achieved this second major feat. Her first was winning the gold medal at the Tokyo Games in 2021. Thus becoming the second Canadian weightlifter ever to take gold. Her achievements and journey inspired the entire Eastern Quebec region, which came together to watch her event. She certainly won the hearts of Quebecers in our regions when she took a sip of Quebec maple syrup right before her event. Some people inspire us every day with their resilience and their courage. Maude Charon is one of them. Maude, congratulations and thank you for everything. The people of Avignon-Lamitis, Matane-Matapédia are very proud of you.
The honourable member from Regina, Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Nearly every day, Canadians are waking up to the news of a new conflict of interest scandal involving carbon tax Carney. Just days after he became the special advisor to the Prime Minister, his first piece of advice was for the Prime Minister to give him $10 billion in taxpayers' money to be used in a new investment fund. Next, it was $2 billion in taxpayers' loans to his friends at Telesat for work that other companies could have done at half the cost. And as if that weren't enough, he is also advocating for mortgage rule changes that will directly benefit his mortgage insurer. Fortunately, tomorrow there will be a vote of non-confidence in this NDP Liberal coalition so that Canadians can have a carbon tax election. Canadians should be the ones who decide between 4 more years of corruption and carbon taxes or a new Conservative government to clean up.
The honourable member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about an issue that is very important to the residents of Mississauga, Aaron Mills, the concern of auto theft and its impact on the lives of my constituents. And that is why our Liberal government is working across jurisdictions to enact real solutions to crack down on auto theft and make our communities safer. Our National Auto Theft Summit in February led to a national action plan, enhanced detection at major ports, and stronger collaboration with local police. And it is thanks to these collective efforts that auto thefts decreased by 17% in the first 6 months of 2024. This success is due in no small part to our local police forces, and I want to particularly highlight Chief Nishant Duriyappa, Deputy Chief Nick Milanovic, and Peel Regional Police officers for their incredible efforts to arrest criminals and recover stolen vehicles through Project Odyssey and more initiatives. Mr. Speaker, this is what real action looks like. Thank you.
Oral questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Tomorrow, the Bloc will have to vote on a motion to decide, yes or no, if they're going to keep the most centralizing and costly government in power in the history of Canada. What's bad is for Quebec are costs that have doubled in terms of housing and the doubling of the national debt. The Quebec Premier says that the Quebec nation doesn't want to show its confidence in this government. And even after the Minister of Immigration, the Liberal minister, said that he broke the immigration system, and even if the minister doesn't have trust in his track record, why should the Bloc have trust in him or them? Once again, you have raised this issue yesterday and last week. You need to address questions to the government. I see that the Honourable Minister is standing to answer, but I'd just like to remind members that it's important for questions to be relevant to the government administration so that members can provide clear answers. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Conservative leader, after 20 years in this House, does not understand yet how the House works. One thing they don't still understand is the importance of dental care for Quebecers. He talks about hurting Quebecers. What does he tell Quebecers in my region? Don't sign up for the Canadian Dental Care Program because it doesn't exist. While in Quebec, there are 800,000 seniors that are signed up for dental care. He's telling them, don't sign up. It doesn't exist. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. This government has doubled housing costs for people in the Quebec region and tripled the cost of housing in Montreal and made the cost of food skyrocket so that too many Canadians have had to go to food banks every month. It's also pushed Quebec to the breaking point with an immigration system that the Liberal minister himself has said is broken. So the Quebec nation does not want a centralizing and costly government. Will the members vote for an election to elect a common sense government? The Honourable Minister of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, there's a great deal of hypocrisy in this question. They're worried about people's lives, they say, but the Conservative leader isn't able to say clearly what his hidden agenda is. When the member for Grasslands has a trip paid to go to Florida, where he can sell a vision that is anti-abortion and anti-women's rights. And the first thing they need to do is control their caucus and reassure women here in Canada that their rights will not be affected.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
9 years of the NDP Liberals. Costs are up, taxes up, crime's up, time's up. This government has doubled the cost of housing, doubled the debt, forced 2 million people to the food bank, raised taxes, and now they want a 61-cent a litre carbon tax that will grind our economy to a halt. The good news is, in a carbon tax election, Canadians can axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Can we bring it home now?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, maybe I can speak in a language the Leader of the Opposition will understand. They're going to cut the dental. They're going to axe the pharmacare, they're going to break the health system, and they're going to destroy childcare. The difference between those slogans and the nonsense he throws around, the vacuous garbage that's best left for Nabisco, not for the House of Commons, is that's the stuff he's actually going to do. And at some point, he's going to have to look in the eyes of seniors and tell them what he's going to do to dental care. He's going to have to look in the eyes of diabetes patients and say what he's going to do with their diabetes medication. At some time, the vitriol's done and the truth comes.
Colleagues, we're skating pretty close to the line. I'd recommend for members to ensure that they don't do that. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that when that member thinks of the prospect of a carbon tax election, he comes unglued and becomes very rattled and loses control of himself, waving his hands around because he's desperate to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre. He's desperate to push a government takeover that will shut down people's private drug plans and ban them from having access to their medical plans. Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime, and protect your drug plan. How about that?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, this is the guy who said dental care doesn't exist. This is the guy that said providers won't sign up. Well, I got news for you. 750,000 people across this country got care. I also got news for you, Mr. Speaker, and that is more than 80% of providers has signed up. We're getting it done. So he can fearmonger, he can scare people, but we're going to get it done on pharma as well. We're going to make sure that diabetes patients get their medication. We're going to make sure that women get their contraceptive, because that's what freedom looks like. A woman who has choice over her own body.
I'd like to remind all ministers, all members, that answers should be directed, questions should be asked and answers should be directed through the chair. And I'm going to again ask members to make sure we don't skate too close to the line. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What his plan does is quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre and imposes a single payer that bans women from using their existing private plans to get contraceptives or any other form of medication. That's what a single payer means. And that is not what freedom looks like, Mr. Speaker. What he actually wants to do is quadruple the carbon tax, which will grind our economy to a halt. It will be a nuclear winter for our economy. Why don't we allow Canadians to vote in a carbon tax election to decide if they're ready to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what freedom doesn't look like, and it doesn't look like Conservative members of Parliament taking all expenses, paid trips to Florida to talk about how
The honourable member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Vita Lakes, I would appreciate if he would, when he has his turn, and I know that he'll have his turn to ask questions, would refrain from speaking out of turn. The honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll tell you what freedom doesn't look like, and it's Conservative members of Parliament taking all expensive paid trips to talk at anti-abortion conferences and to push forward an anti-abortion vision of Canada. Mr. Speaker, when he talks about women's rights, he neglects to share his hidden agenda that would take away their reproductive rights. Mr. Speaker, when he talks about freedom, he only talks about half of the story. Mr. Speaker, today what we are doing is demonstrating that this House does not have confidence in the leader of the Conservative Party.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, time is running out for the Liberals. It's decision time. They must choose between economic justice for seniors or an election. They can put an end to the two classes of seniors they've created by depriving those aged under 74 and under of 10% of OAS granted to the oldest. Or they can go out and officially consult people, hoping very, very hard that the polls are wrong. We'll take the senior side. What will the Liberals choose? Time's running out. The Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker, unlike the Bloc Québécois, it's the Liberal Party of Canada that works for seniors and has done so for recent years by increasing the GIS by $1,000, helping more than 1 million seniors in Canada. We increased 30% the gains from the GIS so that those who work can keep a larger portion of what they earn. The Bloc voted against that, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for La Prairie. Seniors deserve better than partisanship. It's distressing to hear that the Liberals descend into partisanship when we talk to them about the standard of living of retirees. We're talking about seniors who have worked hard for decades to earn a good retirement. They deserve answers. Seniors are listening to us, so we're going to repeat this. Are the Liberals going to improve OAS for people under 74, yes or no? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, I'll repeat this once again for my friend and his party. Quebecers, seniors in Quebec, have the right to wake up this morning and wonder, what's happened to them? They've always voted against seniors. The Bloc has always voted against our plans to enhance the lives, particularly of seniors, of the most vulnerable people in Canada. And recently they voted against the dental care plan for Quebec seniors. Shame on them, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Burnaby South.
The Liberals are too weak to stand up to Doug Ford, so some patients are leaving surgeries with thousands of dollars of bills. The Liberals are too weak to stand up to Daniel Smith. And so people in our province are forced to pay to see a doctor. See, that's what Conservatives do. They cut and gut health care so their big business buddies can use that to rip off Canadians even more. Why is the Liberal government letting Conservatives privatize our health care system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you're going to be talking about being too weak, 2 days after the NDP leader got a letter from the leader of the Conservative opposition saying to back out of standing up for pharmacare and standing up for improvements in the healthcare system, he ran away. And if he ran away from that, how is he going to stand up for Canadians, is what I would ask, Mr. Speaker. And I would say that we had a chance. We were working well together. We got things done on dental. 750,000 people, over 80% of providers. We were working well together on pharmacare. If he has ideas, he knows we were all ears. But he's all about politics, Mr. Speaker. He's all about trying to divide rather than working together.
colleagues.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Conservative premiers privatize our healthcare system and have done nothing about it.
The last Conservative government slashed healthcare funding by $43.5 billion. This represents more than 60,000 nurses every year. But now the Conservative premiers like François Legault are privatizing our healthcare system, and the Liberals are doing nothing about it. Why are the Liberals doing nothing to protect people and Canadian healthcare legislation? The Honourable Minister of Health.
I get frustrated because there is an existential crisis facing our health system, and it is represented in the person of the Conservative leader, whose cuts and approach to health care to destroy pharmacare, to attack dental care, to undermine the deals that we've signed with provinces and territories, greatly menace this thing that we treasure, public health. And the investments that we made, they must continue. The progress we made must continue. That's why I urge parliamentarians to stand up against what the Conservatives would do to this health system and work collaboratively to make sure that we get the care that every Canadian deserves.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP government, we know that they are just not worth the cost, and the evidence is everywhere you look. In Ontario, for the first time ever, over 1 million people visited a food bank in just 1 year. That's thanks to the radical Liberal NDP carbon tax. Ontario families say they just can't keep up with the mountain of debt and the taxes that this Prime Minister has poured all over them. So why won't this government call a carbon tax election and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and for Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to read an extract from a report that came out today from the Insurance Bureau of Canada, and I quote, "Summer of 2024 ranks as the most destructive season in Canadian history for insured losses due to severe weather. In only 2 months, July and August, this summer eclipsed the worst year on record and has pushed 2024 year-to-date tally over $7.7 billion in severe natural catastrophes, Mr. Speaker. What's the answer from the Leader of the Opposition? Let the planet burn. We won't take this on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker.
I know the member from St. Albert, Edmonton, St. Albert would like to pose this question, but I'll ask him to wait his turn before taking the floor. The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I thought the carbon tax was supposed to fix all of that. They won't call a carbon tax election because they know exactly what Canadians will say. 2023 was the 8th consecutive year that food bank usage rose. By some great coincidence, it was also the 8th consecutive year of this Liberal government. So how many more people need to visit or need to be forced to a food bank before the Environment Minister admits that taxes are up, that costs are up, that crime is up, and that his time is up?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the Conservative Party and its leader are not there to protect Canadians. They're there to protect the interest of their friends, like oil executives who attended a special event for the Leader of the Opposition. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that oil executives don't come to my fundraiser. I can guarantee you that. But what they want to do is take away, in his riding, Carleton, 58,000 people are receiving the Canada Carbon Rebate. In Thornhill, more than 60,000 people are receiving more money than what they pay in carbon pricing. We're helping with affordability, Mr. Speaker, and we're helping to fight climate change.
The Honourable Member from Foothills.
For 9 years, the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and yes, time is up. According to the Liberal NDP's government's own statistics, the number of Canadians suffering with food insecurity is up 111%. Wow. That is a quarter of Canadians who don't know where their next meal is coming from. But there is a solution. Axe the carbon tax and give Canadians the relief they need. They know that 70% of Canadians want to axe the tax. Will they listen to Canadians tomorrow and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It would be great in this House if the official opposition actually worked with facts. The vast majority of Canadians get more money back. We have a climate plan that is actually working, fighting the existential threat of climate change, but it is also creating economic opportunity and prosperity for the future. We have seen over 100 clean growth projects, $60 billion of investment. It's the $12 billion Dow invested in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's the Jansen Potash Mine. It's the Soyona Lithium plant in Quebec. It is a plan that is working. They have no plan for the future on the environment and no plan on the economy.
The honourable member from Foothills.
Here's what their plan is doing. The Liberal NDP carbon tax is driving up costs on farmers, on truckers, on food manufacturers, and prices at the grocery store, and Canadians can't afford to put food on the table. According to Food Banks Alberta, use is up 73%, and 40% of those are children. Meanwhile, the Liberal NDP government say, hey, Canadians have never had it so good. Well, food banks are struggling just to meet demand. If the Liberal NDP government thinks that their carbon tax is so great, will they call a carbon tax election tomorrow and let Canadians decide?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. We know that children suffer from food insecurity during tough times, so we've set up a school food program that will allow us to feed 400,000 children extra than what is currently the case. And we're working with the provinces and territories to unroll this program that will really help our children. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. The Liberal government is a bad one for Quebec. After 9 years, the Bloc Liberal coalition doubled the cost of housing, has created the worst inflation for the past 40 years, forced students to live in their parents' basements, made Quebec at the breaking point for immigration, and they voted for $500 billion in inflationary spending. Can the Prime Minister and his Quebec lieutenant allow Quebecers to choose a common-sense government during an election? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy to answer this question about inflation because the good news is that inflation is down to 2%. And throughout this year, it has been in the target range of the Bank of Canada. Because of this, the Bank of Canada has started lowering its key rate. This is the good news for Canadians. The only thing that the Conservatives are offering is their hidden agenda of austerity. They want to cut, cut, cut. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Cut tax, cut the inflation, cut grocery prices. That's what we're going to cut, Mr. Speaker. The Liberal Bloc coalition have a different idea than what they're saying today. Talking about the Prime Minister, this is what the Bloc leader said. I think he has his hand in Quebecers' pockets. He wants to be able to spend, and he's running up a terrible deficit that Quebecers will have to pay and pay for quite some time. Why are they allowing the Prime Minister to have his hands in Quebecers' pockets? Can they allow Quebecers to choose their own government, a common-sense government? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I trust Quebecers. They understand that they don't have common sense. And we have been a government that has been there for Quebecers. Exemplary investment, for example, in aerospace and record investment in aluminum and investment in the automotive sector and in the digital sector. We are creating jobs. We're fighting to also build industry for tomorrow and to build the Quebec of tomorrow and the Canada of tomorrow. That's what Quebecers expect of us. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, all this fuss and for what? For a year now, Quebec has been demanding a fair distribution of asylum seekers amongst the provinces. And today, the Minister of Immigration announced that this will not happen and that the task force is coming to an end. There'll be no distribution except for the only two willing provinces, Newfoundland and Manitoba. For them, they understand that forcing Quebec to take in asylum seekers from all over Canada is creating a humanitarian crisis. This is appreciated, but their effort won't be enough. Can the minister accept such a colossal failure? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I stand with the member opposite to help asylum seekers and put a roof over their heads. And I understand the issue of the Quebec, but we are there for Quebecers and we're going to help them fix this problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Newfoundland and Manitoba together represent 5% of the Canadian population. And if they do their fair share, Quebec will only be relieved of 5% of their burden of receiving asylum seekers. Neither Quebecers or asylum seekers will notice a difference in the inadequate supply of services. All provinces have to participate. Quebecers don't have to take care of all of Canada's asylum seekers on behalf of Canadians. What is the minister doing to get Canada to stop shoveling its responsibilities onto Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that immigration and citizenship is federal jurisdiction, and we do work with the provinces and territories. If citizenship was provincial jurisdiction, this would be something else, but Canada is still a country today. And the good news that we work very closely and very effectively with the Quebec government on many issues with respect to immigration and welcoming asylum seekers. Things are going well, but when things do go better and better, the Bloc doesn't find this to be such a good thing. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Let's talk about the 4 Conservative provinces that refuse to help Quebec. These Conservatives have never done their fair share, refused to take in one single extra person while Quebec receives half of Canada's asylum seekers. Have you ever heard the federal Conservatives ask their people to help Quebecers? We have never. According to the minister, should the federal Conservatives spend more time here in the House telling their people to help with asylum seekers and less time at Florida creationist churches talking against abortion? Once again, I'd like to remind members that questions should be addressed to the government administration. I see that the minister is rising to answer this question, so I will recognize him, the Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I have a lot to say about the Conservatives' hidden agenda, but I'll leave the Conservatives to discuss that. But let's talk about something that's more relevant for Quebec members, at least in this issue. It's in terms of our relationship with the Quebec government. In recent weeks, we made 3 announcements that are cooperative with respect to immigration, with respect to foreign temporary workers, twice about foreign students, and on several other occasions as well. So things will be going better and better.
The Honourable Member from Kelowna Lake Country.
The NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. It's reported a mother living in a homeless encampment in London, Ontario said, quote, "I'm a mom of 3 and I'm homeless. I just want to get inside into a warm place before winter so I can get my kids back with me where they belong." Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to break down this costly government so we can build the homes they need. Will the NDP Liberal government let Canadians decide on a carbon tax election?
Here, let's go. Again, I'd like to remind the member from Timmins James Bay to only take the floor when he's recognized by the chair. The Honourable, and I remind all members, please, to only take the floor when they're recognized by the chair. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Whether it's my community of London or any Canadian community, Mr. Speaker, where homelessness exists, it's unacceptable. It is a tragic situation. Encampments should not exist. And when the Conservatives stand up and raise these points, they do a good thing. What's not a good thing is that they don't have a plan, Mr. Speaker. It's all a sideshow. It's an act on the other side. They don't care about people who are on the street. If they did, they would have something to say on the matter of homelessness. Instead, they use them here as props in the House of Commons. They film them in encampments, post them on social media, but they have no plan. They don't care, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, homelessness is up and tent encampments are up. And in fact, homelessness is up 38% in Canada. There are now 1,400 tent encampments in just Ontario alone. Liberal photo ops won't build the 5.8 million homes that are needed to restore housing affordability in Canada. Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians, there's a chance to break down this costly government so we can build the homes they need. So will the NDP Liberal government let Canadians decide on a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I work with that member on the House of Commons committee responsible for housing. I know she's sincere when she raises these points, but her party has no plan, Mr. Speaker. In fact, every single member on the opposite side, when they had a chance to vote in favor of measures to confront the challenge of homelessness, the crisis that we see on our streets, said no. They said no to more supports for communities. They said no to more support for not-for-profits. 87,000 people taken off the street as a result of investments we've made. We have more to do, and we will do it, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
After 9 years of these NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and yes, now their time is up. The capital gains tax is yet another job-killing tax on small businesses. Now, Liberals will say it only applies to the top 0.13%, but what the finance minister won't say is that it will not apply to the bottom 99.87%. Tomorrow, the NDP and Bloc have a chance to bring down this costly government by voting for our Conservative non-confidence motion. Will they finally let Canadians decide in a carbon tax election?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government believes in tax fairness for all Canadians. That's because we believe that a Canadian teacher or nurse shouldn't be paying tax at a higher rate than a multimillionaire. That is because we believe that in Canada, you shouldn't be able to tell the size of someone's paycheck by their smile. And that is because we believe that no teenage girl in Canada should get pregnant because she can't afford contraceptives. The way we pay for those essential programs, Mr. Speaker, is through tax fairness. But we know the only thing Conservatives stand for is a hidden agenda of cuts and austerity. That's right.
The honourable member from Durham.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Now, last week, we learned that the Parole Board of Canada granted day parole to a serial rapist who has been convicted in 2020 for assaulting 5 women. And that parole board, Mr. Speaker, is appointed by this Liberal government. The chair of the board answers to the Liberal Public Safety Minister. So when will the NDP Liberals start locking up violent repeat offenders?
Good question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite knows well that the parole board makes independent decisions of government. But, Mr. Speaker, what's sad is that the Conservatives would rather politicize the independence of our judicial system to create fear and fearmonger for their own political gain. Mr. Speaker, they want to undermine our democratic institutions for political gain. All Canadians should be very concerned about the Conservatives and their plans and their cuts in our criminal justice system.
Hear, hear. The honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Speaker, in Alberta, Conservative cuts to health care have left
hundreds of thousands of Albertans without a family doctor, and it is getting worse. 58% of Alberta doctors are planning on leaving the province in the next 5 years. The Conservative plan to privatize healthcare is forcing Canadians to choose between the care they need or having to pay out of pocket. Albertans are Canadians too, and the Canada Health Act is supposed to protect all Canadians. Why do the Liberals sit back while Daniel Smith cuts healthcare for Canadians?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know for the member opposite and for every member of this caucus, the universal public nature of our healthcare system is essential. It is so critical that we make sure that every Canadian everywhere has access to the care that they need based on need, not based on the size of their bank account. And that's why the threat of Conservative cuts, the attacks they want to make on our health system are so menacing. It's why this House must work collaboratively to ensure we get it done. That's why the investment of $200 billion over the next 10 years in our health system is also critically important.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
And I hope that the Health Minister heeds his words as he looks at taking dental care away from Canadians. The Liberal Minister of Procurement recently threatened Canadians on TV that this government would take away dental care if they don't get their way. It wouldn't be the first time Liberals let Canadians down. Together with Conservatives, they voted no to lowering grocery prices.
Wow.
They voted no to making big grocers pay what they owe, and they voted no to remove profits from long-term care.
Okay.
We know Conservatives will take away dental care from Canadians while they keep theirs. Why are the Liberals threatening to do the same?
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the member will well know the only party that I'm aware of threatening dental care in this country is the Conservative Party of Canada, who's made it, who refused to answer a question. And when you refuse to answer a question, I think you can fill in the blanks, right? They want to cut it. And first they tried to say it didn't exist. Then they said that nobody would sign up for it.
Excuse me. Colleagues. Colleagues. I'm going to invite the Honourable Minister. He would have about 15 seconds left on the clock to continue and finish his answer.
750,000 so far. And the path forward is clear. There is 9 million Canadians that need to be served. There are 9 million Canadians who didn't have coverage. There are 9 million people who the Conservatives don't believe deserve dental care. Well, we do, Mr. Speaker, and we are not going to rest or stop until everyone is covered.
The Honourable Member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, reports of online child sexual abuse rose by 850% in the past 10 years in Canada. Mr. Speaker, our kids deserve better. As a father of 3 young daughters, I am worried about the dangers that lurk online and the lack of robust online safety laws to ensure the protection of our children, who often are at a vulnerable and impressionable age. Can the Minister of Justice please share how he plans to keep our children safe online? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister, for Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, parents across Canada are worried about their children's safety online. As a parent, I share their fear. That's why it's crucial that we implement laws dedicated to keeping our kids safe. That's why I introduced the Online Harms Act. Bill C-63 introduces the first ever safety standards for online platforms. It couples duties to protect kids with significant penalties for platforms that don't comply. Mr. Speaker, we have rigorous safety laws to protect our kids from harm in the physical world. They need to be safe online as well. We're creating a safer online world for our kids. It's really unfortunate that Conservatives cannot get on side with this important legislation.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, the Minister's order is an affront to Quebec's regions. It's yet another attempt by Ottawa to interfere in Quebec jurisdiction. At least 1,400 jobs are at risk, and entire communities are threatened. We Conservatives understand that the impact will be disastrous. Tomorrow, on behalf of all Canadians and Quebecers, we'll have a chance to put an end to this centralizing government. Will the Bloc Liberal coalition let Quebecers decide in an election? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. No plan for the environment, no plan for air quality, no plan for water quality, no plan for the economy, no plan for health. That's the Conservative platform. That's what they have to offer Quebecers. We've done everything we could to try to find solutions to sometimes complex problems. And working with the Quebec government, we've offered almost $500 million, working together to try to find a solution, not just for forestry workers, but also to protect the caribou, which the Conservatives are incapable of doing. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Leflore. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind the Minister that no amount will compensate for job losses, shattered lives, and social crisis. That's what the order will bring us. What the Bloc calls a gain is really just a temporary break until Christmas. The Bloc is no longer a party of the regions. We have to understand that the only possible gain for Quebec is to bring down the Liberals. Will the Bloc Liberal coalition let Quebecers decide in an election? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. I think that all we're going to see tomorrow in this place is that this House has no confidence in the opposition leader because he has no plan to offer Quebecers for its future, for the economy, for the environment, for jobs. Nothing, nothing, nothing. The Honourable Member for Charlesbourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow, on behalf of Canadians, we'll have a chance to put an end to the most costly and centralizing government in our country's history. A government that's doing Quebec a huge disservice, as the Premier of Quebec said just last week. But the Bloc Liberal coalition is propping up a government that will kill at least 1,400 jobs in the Saguenay and North Shore. It's a disaster just waiting to happen. Why not call an election and let forestry workers decide their own future? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Well, I'd like to remind my colleague that there have been 3 elections since 2015 in Canada where the question of the environment was central to the debate and discussion among Canadians, and we won all 3 elections. Maybe they're not happy about that, Mr. Speaker, but what we're going to see tomorrow in this place is that the House does not have confidence in the Conservative Party or the opposition leader because all they want to do is protect their friends and not the public, whether it's the economy, the environment, or jobs. They have nothing to offer. And now I turn the floor over to the member for Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to the environment, this government is always happy to lecture everyone else, but it's do as I say, not as I do. The government has polluted with all his jet setting, and this government has never been able to meet their own targets. There's a reason the UN ranks Canada 62nd out of 67 countries when it comes to their environmental record, and the Bloc keeps propping them up. Mr. Speaker, the Sovereignist Party is going to help a federalist government. How is that acceptable? The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect for my colleague from the other side, but almost everything he just said is false. Greenhouse gases are at their lowest level in 25 years, Mr. Speaker. This is the first time in our country's history that emissions have gone down when the economy's going gangbusters. The last time emissions were this low, Mr. Speaker, O.J. Simpson was in court, so they have nothing to offer on climate change, nothing to do about inflation, when that cost Canadians $7 billion this summer. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Guess whose emails and documents the Liberals are trying to hide from Quebecers? Amira El-Gawabi's. Yep, her again. The Information Commissioner had to issue an order to force the department she reports to respond to an access to information request for 3,000 pages of emails and documents. She's not a minister. She doesn't have access to any confidential strategic information. So what does she have to hide? Why are the Liberals so afraid to release her emails and documents to the public? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. all government organizations and departments, all Crown corporations, all officers of Parliament have the same responsibility to comply with the Access to Information Act, and we will ensure that this is the case here too. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Well, we're not getting much from the minister's answer, and we're not really expecting anything earth-shattering in Ms. El-Gawabi's emails. Why are the Liberals refusing to make them public? At best, we'll find out what she's writing and who she's writing to. Maybe we'll find out which groups she consults. Maybe we'll find out what she really thinks about a couple of other things. We obviously don't expect it to be very eye-opening. Frankly, if the Liberals are so afraid of the public knowing what she's writing and who she's talking to, why wait for it to come out in the papers? Why not fire her right now and then scrap her position?
The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and Youth.
Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to an open and transparent government. The request will be released ahead of the extension, given the Information Commissioner. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, costs are up, taxes are up, crime is up, time is up, and now tariffs are up. The U.S. softwood lumber tariffs have just doubled. And what does this Prime Minister do? Does he make trade headlines? No, he's not making headlines, he's making punchlines on late-night TV where he called the softwood lumber issue a small issue that matters. A small issue that matters, Mr. Speaker. It's 400,000 jobs. When is this Prime Minister going to figure out that he's the punchline and that it's time for a Prime Minister who will make this a large issue that matters for all Canadians, their jobs and their paychecks?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm really glad that the member opposite yesterday saw the Prime Minister's appearance on Stephen Colbert, because especially since we know that they get their news from Tucker Carlson. Canadians who watched last night's interview will know what all Canadians know, that this government stands up for our workers. We stand up for our forestry sector. We will continue to do this work for Canadians and for our workers. The forestry sector contributes enormous jobs to this country, and we will keep doing that work.
The Honourable Member from Bay of Quinte.
Well, Mr. Speaker, lame excuses are also up. The last Prime Minister solved the softwood lumber deal in 80 days. It's been 9 years. And you know why? The last Prime Minister didn't back down. This Prime Minister backs down to Biden, to Obama, to Trump, and the result has been increased unemployment and the risk of another 400,000 jobs in the forestry sector. When this Prime Minister said Canada's back, he meant backed down. Right. Isn't it time for our Prime Minister who will stand up to Canadians once again?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade and Export Development.
Mr. Speaker, when it comes to securing trade deals, we're not going to take any lessons from the Conservatives on this. The Conservative Party wants us to ignore the environment. They want us to ignore workers. They want us to sign bad trade deals. You'll remember that in this House that they wanted us to capitulate on CUSMA. We didn't do that. They cheered on Brexit. We didn't do that. And they abandoned Ukrainians when they needed the most and when we negotiate free trade agreements. On this side of the House, we negotiate good deals, not just any deals, and we won't capitulate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret is a person who has been on the Hill for a long time. I please ask for his indulgence. The Honourable Member from Prince George Peace River and Northern Rockies.
After 9 years of the NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and their time is up. The Prime Minister was on a U.S. talk show last night and dismissed his failures on softwood lumber as a small issue. Yes. This, weeks after the U.S. slapped Canada with a 14.5% tariff on softwood lumber. Since then, 2 more BC mills have closed, putting 500 more workers out of a job. Do the NDP Liberals really think mills closing and losing thousands of forestry jobs is just a small issue?
The Honourable Minister for International Trade and Export Promotion.
Let me begin by thanking the softwood lumber industry and their workers for the tremendous contribution they make to the Canadian economy. You heard the Prime Minister say this. We are talking about this. This long-term dispute doesn't help anybody, and it particularly doesn't help us build affordable homes. On this side of the House, we're really proud that we are tackling housing. We are building affordable homes, and if we are to solve this issue, it'll make housing affordability better in the United States and certainly better here in Canada. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, this summer marked an important event, and that was the inauguration of the long-awaited elementary school in Manawan. This is a school that was partially funded by the federal government, and it will allow for kids in the community to learn about their culture in their language. And so I'd like to ask the Minister of Indigenous Services for an update on the government's efforts to invest in the education of Indigenous children in their communities. The Honourable Minister of Indigenous Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member for Pontiac for her work on access to education. Since 2016, we've increased funding for education by 80%. With Budget 2024, we will be building and renovating more than 200 schools in First Nations communities for 35,000 students. Students are more motivated when they can relate to what they're learning. The proof is clear.
From Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime's up, and time's up. Last night, the Prime Minister appeared on The Late Show to pathetically explain why he keeps backing down to American presidents on softwood lumber. He called his failure on softwood lumber a small issue. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of forestry workers have lost their jobs. It's an insult to them. After 9 years of repeatedly backing down to each and every president on softwood lumber, how can Canadians believe they'll ever get a deal to lift these punishing tariffs?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government has stood up to Trump and our government has stood up to Putin. Meanwhile, when Putin told the Conservatives to vote against the free trade deal with Ukraine, they said, okay, fine. And when Trump threatened Canada with 232 tariffs against steel and aluminum, we stood up to the U.S. You know what the Conservatives said? They said that was dumb, and they told us to back down. We did not. We will never back down to bullies. We will always stand up for Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Dufferin-Caledon.
It's pathetic. That from the government that allowed detonators, Canadian detonators, to end up in Russian landmines that blew up Ukrainian troops. They're a disgrace. They've backed down to Trump on softwood. They backed down from Obama on softwood. They backed down to Biden on softwood. And after 9 years of complete and total failure, tens of thousands of forestry workers have lost their jobs. She didn't even address it. And her Prime Minister insulted them by saying it's a small issue. We know this arrogant Prime Minister won't apologize to the forestry workers, so will they let him judge him in a carbon tax election?
Once again, members, I invite them to be very prudent and judicious in their choice of words. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, when our country faced an existential economic challenge, the threat that our free trade agreement with the United States would be torn up, our government stood up to the U.S. and the Conservatives ran scared. They told us to back down. When the U.S. imposed illegal 232 tariffs on our steel and aluminum, we stood up for Canadians. We imposed countervailing tariffs. The Conservatives told us to back down. Canadians remember that. We will never back down. We stand up for.
The Honourable Member from Prince Albert.
When it comes to defending jobs, we would never tell anybody to back down. Only this Prime Minister does that. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, their time is up. Last night, the Prime Minister told Stephen Colbert that his failure to negotiate a deal on softwood lumber and fisheries was a small issue.
Unbelievable.
Seriously, there's been over $9 billion that Canadian companies have paid to the U.S. in tariffs. There's 800,000 direct and indirect jobs on the line. The forestry sector is in a crisis. Yet this Prime Minister has backed down time and time again to 3 different presidents. Why does this Prime Minister show much disdain to Canadian workers?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party in this House that shows disdain to Canadian workers, and it's the Conservative Party of Canada. Time and time again, when our country has had to negotiate trade deals, this government has stood for Canadians. We renegotiated NAFTA. We stood up against the U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs, and we will continue to stand up for Canadian workers in all sectors, including the forestry sector. But, Mr. Speaker, what is up is time for them to stop playing political games and to get down to the serious business of governing this country. That's what Canadians expect. It's time for them to grow up. Yeah, very good.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, 2 years ago today, our region braced as Hurricane Fiona made landfall. In the aftermath, we learned that this vicious storm had destroyed homes, reshaped our coastlines, and most tragically, had taken lives. The resilience of islanders and all Atlantic Canadians became apparent afterwards as we all came together as neighbours to support each other. On this somber anniversary, I'd like to ask the Minister what HoC has done to support our region to rebuild, recover, and thrive in the wake of this deadly disaster.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague because when his community was hurting, he was there to help, and our government was also there to help our region get back on its feet. Through the Hurricane Fiona Recovery Fund, HoC delivered over $300 million to support shellfish producers and farmers, and we rebuilt small craft harbors. We repaired damage in our national parks, and we set up comfort centers for communities to be ready for that next climate event. We will always step up and have each other's back, Mr. Speaker. It was 2 years ago, and it's still true today. We are stronger than the storm.
The Honourable Member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, today the Minister of Environment called out the Conservatives for holding a fundraiser with oil and gas executives, which would be great, except that the Liberals over the past year have met with oil and gas lobbyists 5 times a day. It's no wonder that they continue to water down key climate policies and hand out billions in subsidies. CEOs like Suncor's Rich Kruger have never had it so good. On top of all that, they bought him a pipeline. When will the Liberals put a hard cap on emissions, close the loopholes in the industrial carbon price, and make big polluters pay what they owe?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to read a quote from the member from Victoria. The carbon tax is a crucial piece of our climate plan. I'd like to read you another quote from the member from Victoria. The PBO has put out a number on reports that confirm that 80% of Canadians get more money back than they pay. This is a fact that the Conservatives continue to ignore. I think there are a lot of people out there who are very concerned about climate change and who are wondering what's happening with the NDP and who are very disappointed with the fact that the NDP, faced with pressure from the Conservatives and lies and misinformation, caved, Mr. Speaker. We won't cave on this side of the House.
The Honourable Member from Timmins James Bay.
Oh my God. Let's talk about the Liberal price of pollution. We now learn that taxpayers were hit up for $1,200 per household to get the TMX boondoggle built. That's a direct subsidy from Canadians' pockets to Suncor. And this Prime Minister, Sunny Ways man, is responsible for the biggest increases in oil production and emissions in history. No wonder that Richie Rich Kruger from Suncor says the sun is shining on the tar sands. Sunny Ways while our planet burns. So will the Environment Minister at least admit to the world that he had no intention of ever dealing with emissions when he went to COP? He was there to be the front for Suncor and for Imperial.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say on this side of the House we've seen an
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we have seen yet another drop in emissions on a pathway. We are on track to achieve the emissions reductions that we have committed to by 2030 to the international community. But I do think, Mr. Speaker, that many are very concerned about the NDP's backing away of having any credible policy with respect to climate change. And I would say their flip-flop at the behest of the Conservative Party leader on carbon pricing is amazing. The member from Rosemont-La Petite-Patrie said, as New Democrats, as progressives, as environmentalists, we are in favor in putting a price on pollution. I guess they are no longer progressive or environmentalists.
Colleagues, it being 3:19, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion to concur in the 18th report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Comme il est 15 heures.
As it is 3:19, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion to concur in the 18th report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Call on the member. The question is as follows.
Ms. Rood, seconded by Mr. Stanley, moved that the 18th report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food, presented on Thursday, May 23, 2024, be concurred in. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those